Good morning, folks. Today's October 2nd, 2020, and we're going to talk a little bit today about similarities between Forrest Gump and President Trump's positive test for COVID-19, which was announced this morning. Forrest Gump, who was a fictional character, said, "My mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." Well, that's how I felt this morning when I got up and heard about the October surprise with President Trump and our First Lady having a positive COVID-19 test. But let's talk a little bit about SFA projected October surprises before we go into that further. First, in October, our firm believes, based on science, that there will be at least one proven and effective COVID vaccine approved and authorized by the FDA for emergency use. We think this will accelerate the current reopening of our country's economy and lead to even more individuals returning to work. Speaking of that, this morning's announcement on unemployment took the unemployment rate down to 7.9% from 8.4% last month. Economists expect it to drop to 8.2%. Our economy continues to improve. The airline industry is also another area we've talked about and projected we're going to see approximately $25 billion in additional U.S. government support to the industry in the month of October. This is going to cover the airline's revenue shortfalls and help keep employees on salary. Boeing is affected by that indirectly, but they're also directly affected by the fact that the FAA's administrator, Steve Dickson, has flown the 737 MAX, had a very good news conference discussing that flight, and it's our belief that the 737 MAX will be cleared by the FAA in October to return to the air. This is going to drive up the value of our Boeing stock. Flaps up, folks. The Boeing effect beyond that is something that's interesting too. Boeing is such a large company, it does so much in the way of foreign trade with overseas sales that does affect the entire country when the 737 MAX is reauthorized to fly. We also have forecast that the third nomination received by President Trump by the Nobel Peace Prize is likely to cause him to win the Peace Prize, which will be announced on October 9th. It's further our belief that based on electoral college trends, by the end of October, we're likely to see a strong move that would indicate the re-election of President Trump. That means his policies are going to be re-elected. Policies like a pro-business environment, putting American interests first, creating more higher-paying manufacturing jobs, lowering prescription and health care costs, additional needed criminal sentencing reform, and further U.S. beneficial trade agreements. Here's a non-projected Spectrum Financial Alliance surprise. This morning I got up at 4:30 and noted that President Trump and the First Lady were tested positive for COVID-19, proving the truth of Forrest Gump's statement about never knowing what you're going to get. But the net market effect of this, in our opinion, is zero. I want to show you why I came to that conclusion. Whenever I see an event like this, I like to find an economic model that I can use to show the effect. This is a model that shows March 31st through April 30th of this year, because on March 31st, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, of England, contracted COVID-19. So we show a month movement in the UK's equity market. And you'll find there that their market appreciated strongly over that period of time, a one-month return of 4.04%. Now, Boris was pretty sick during this time because at this point, COVID was much more virulent. We talked about this in various communications with you in March and April. Every time a virus is passed, it weakens. The next recipient has a weaker version of it. So the virus that existed in our country and overseas in March and April is no longer. It's metamorphized into something that's far weaker. he was back in action within a couple of weeks. Ronald Reagan's assassination attempt is another model I picked up this morning. On April 30th of March 30th of 1981, there was an assassination attempt by a coward by the name of John Hinckley. That was a very serious attempt, and it almost resulted in the death of President Reagan. 1 month later, with a serious assassination attempt that did move our markets, we find that the S&P and Dow Jones were up 0.56, Dow down 1.09%. This indicates very little market movement occurred from a very serious event that resulted in our president's hospitalization for 10 days. That is equivalent to the quarantine time that President Trump will go through, except he's not going to be weakened much if we want to judge him on his constitution, his high energy level, and the fact he has zero comorbidities. SFA's takeaways from today's news on COVID are, this could be a net positive for our markets. I believe, folks, that this is going to play positively for the president, and the reason it is it'll engender quite a bit of sympathy. There's been a large outpouring in support for him and his wife, our First Lady, Melania. And what we've seen from his Twitter tweet last night at 1 a.m., where he announced the positive test, is at current time 1.4 million positive thoughts going back to President Trump in his most popular Twitter tweet ever. We do not believe this will in any way change the election outcome. What it will do is keep him confined to the White House, on the phone, making calls, and doing virtual appearances for a approximate 10-day period of time. The president's physician has said it will have no outcome, there will be no negative outcome to the president's ability to operate over that period of time. He will be able to discharge his duties. Therefore, there is no change in our firm's projected portfolio movement of 20 to 30% by the end of 2020. In fact, the market opened up down about 1.5% at 9:30 this morning, and the last time I looked at it, we had erased about half of that deficit. This is clearly a buying opportunity, particularly for our clients who are still sitting in cash, and we do have a few folks that are. Since we called the market bottom, which we did in communications to you on April 2nd of this year, we called that bottom as of March 23rd. Since that time, Spectrum accounts together, net of all costs, have appreciated a total of 44.41%. And let me put that into layman's terms. That means if you had $100,000 that was sitting in cash and it was invested the day after the market low of March 23rd, that $100,000 would have appreciated to $144,410. Invest now. There's a full listing of all applicable disclosures. Folks, it's an honor to serve you. This is another example of how we are going to quickly react, primarily through our email system and social media, when there are questions that arise about our clients' valued assets and investment accounts. Please give us a call at 859-223-6333 if you have any questions at all, but please also be assured this should be a non-economic event. It could easily morph into something positive. I'd also caution you that you're going to get the normal negative media response. We had some of that this morning from the New York Times, forecasting that President Trump would have to drop out of the race. That's not going to happen. He is asymptomatic, as is our First Lady. For a vigorous man at his age 71, there should be 74, there should be little or no impact from this to him. He will continue to discharge his duties in all likelihood, and if not, of course, Vice President Pence would be able to step in and easily pick up that slack. Please call us if you have any questions, and more importantly, have a great weekend and go Cats.